Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, we're ready to go.
I would like to call the December 7th, 2021 meeting to order at 6 o'clock. Thank you. Now, if Councilmember Cavallari could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now for roll call.
Yes, Mayor Holtzclaw, Mayor Pro Tem Vanel,
Here.
Councilmember Bond, Councilmember Cavallari,
Here.
Councilmember Steckler,
Here.
Councilmember Allison,
Here.
Councilmember Duque.
Here. Councilmember Bond and Mayor Holtzclaw have both let us know that they would be on vacation this evening. Do I have a motion to excuse?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Do we have a second to that motion?
Yes, I think it was Councilmember Steckler.
Thank you.
We have audience communication. I do see that we have a couple members from the fire district here this evening. We do have a packed agenda, so I would like to ask that you stay in the 3-minute time frame for comment, and just want to let everybody know that we received the proposal last night, and staff is evaluating that, and we will be discussing that with a presentation for the whole council next week. So just to let you know, so if you want to have whoever wants to speak now, it's name, address, and 3 minutes. Anybody? Carmen Fisher.
Hi, I'm Carmen Fisher. I live at 14623 Main Street, apartment B101 in Mill Creek. I came down, well, it's good to see everybody. Hi. I came down to ask that before hiring a new city manager, we have a conversation, you guys have a conversation about moving from the city manager council system to the strong mayor system. I know you guys know what that means. I'm going to explain those terms for anybody else. Council manager system, like we have, involves the council doing all the legislation, and their employee, who's a professional who is hired, is the city manager. It's their sole employee, and the city manager is responsible for all of the administration, kind of, but not exactly like an executive branch. Whereas a strong mayor or mayor council system involves an elected mayor who works as an executive with the council as a legislative branch, just so everybody knows. Most cities in Washington use the strong mayor system, although most newer cities since the 70s have incorporated as city manager council. So I like the city manager system in theory. You know, it sounds great to me that we would have a professional and they would be here over time and things wouldn't be all up in the air always. But that's just not how it's been working out for Mill Creek. That's just not what we've seen. And the strong mayor works for a lot of cities. I'm not even completely sure which I would prefer, but I am very sure that the citizens, after all of the expenses of switching from city manager to city manager, they deserve like a real conversation about this to happen in this forum. And I've just barely looked at how we would change that. From what I can tell, it would involve a referendum. So it can't be changed without the citizens actually voting on it. And that referendum can originate either from you or from petitions with signatures. Again, for anybody who doesn't know. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. Anyone else in the audience would like to speak?
Hello, my name is Ben Palmer. I live at 15320 Mill Creek Boulevard. I actually wandered in because I wanted to just let the city know about a safety concern. I was just crossing Mill Creek Boulevard and 161st Street at the crosswalk right there. I hit the button to cross, and I do it a lot, so it's kind of like automatic, but the light didn't come on. And I was nearly struck by a truck that had to slam on its brakes. So I just wanted the city to be aware of that. I suspect it has to do with that whole system being solar powered. So it doesn't turn on consistently when you strike the button to cross. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that to the city's attention so that, no one gets hurt, because I nearly was tonight. So glad I could come in here. This is my first time at a city council meeting. So thank you.
Thank you. Can you make sure you leave that information with Martin as the interim city manager? Because he can make sure that someone from Public Works takes a look at that and make sure it's handled.
Great.
Thank you. I see online, I see Barb Heidel. Barb?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. My name is Barb Heidel, 1401 144th Place, Southeast Mill Creek. This is in regards to the search that you are going to begin doing for the city manager. I hope that a Washington firm will be used for the search and not the firm that we used the previous time. I hope a thorough background check will be done, which it definitely needs to be done. Also, I hope as last time we have focus groups to interview the prospective city manager, i.e. the employees have a group that interviews them. The citizens have a group to interview the prospective city manager. And of course, city council. I think it's very important that we get input from many people, not just the council. And I hope that we have a very good firm that is going to be used this time. Thank you.
No, that was the method we used last time with those committees. So I'm sure we will be looking at doing that again. Thank you. I don't see anyone else's hand raised. Last chance. There'll be another chance at the end of the meeting tonight for audience communication. I don't see anyone. I'm trying to scroll through here. Am I missing anyone? We'll hold two public hearings. The first public hearing will be on the 2021-2022 biennial budget amendment. The second public hearing will be on the 2021-2026 capital improvement plan amendment. The hearings are required by statute. Public notice of each of the hearings was published. The process that we will use tonight will be as follows. First, I will ask for a motion to open the public hearing on the 2021-22 budget amendment. If there is a second and an affirmative vote, we then will receive a staff report from Finance Director Laurel Gemzo regarding the budget amendment. Next, we will hear the public's testimony. Please limit your testimony to 3 minutes. Once all the members of the public in person and online have had a chance to testify, I will ask for a motion to close the public hearing. Next, council will engage in discussion and propose changes, if any, that council would like to have made in the budget so that the staff has direction for preparing the ordinance for adoption. We are not being asked to adopt a budget this evening or CIP amendment ordinance tonight. The second public hearing is on the 2021-2026 capital improvement plan amendment. Again, I will request a motion to open the public hearing. If there is a second and an affirmative vote, we again start the hearing with the staff report from Director Gemzo. Next, we will hear from any member of the public in person or attending by Zoom meeting interested in testifying during the hearing. Once all testimony has been received, I will ask for a motion to close the public hearing. Once the hearing is closed, council will be provided an opportunity to ask staff any questions raised during the public hearing. Are there any questions? If not, Is there a motion to open the public hearing on the 2021-2022 biennial budget amendment?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. And I will turn it over to Director Gimzo.
All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so tonight we're just going to review the proposed budget amendment. This is something we've reviewed and updated over previous meetings. We had our first public hearing November 9th, and tonight is the final public hearing for the 2021-2022 biennial budget amendment. So this is going to provide the public a chance to comment on the proposed amendment. Currently, ARPA funding is not included in the presentation, but it will be added to the final amendment. This was done to assist with spotting trends. Revenues have been updated to reflect the levy rates adopted at the November 23rd meeting, and the final budget adoption is scheduled for our next meeting on December 14th. And if we need, we do have up through December 31st to adopt the budget. So moving in, we have the 2022 revenue trend that has been modified here, right here. That does have the new rates. Assumptions for this budget are the operations picked up in 2021, and we are going to move toward normal levels by mid-2022. And then we are expecting farm sales and use tax to fall off in 2022. Our current reserve is above required levels, and we have put off a sales tax construction transfer from the general fund just in case additional funding is needed related to fire services for 2023. If we don't end up needing the additional funding, the sales tax transfer that was put off can be made in 2023 or 2024. Okay, and then ARPA funding would be about 5.8 million, and our revenue reserve requirements of 15% are roughly 4.6 million. So moving in the overall amendment, you can see pretty easy. Taxes came in over budget, but charges for service were dramatically lower than budgeted. When the budget was adopted, it was noted that revenue projections were assuming that services would resume normal levels, but COVID continues to impact services. So, for example, a lot of the different recreation classes had to be refunded that we had restarted because we had different instructors or students catch COVID and then replacements couldn't be located. Staff's working to provide the community more normal services, but there's only so much you can do with when you're in the middle of a pandemic. Okay, so from here, for expenses, the adjustments that were made are mainly related to salaries and benefits, legal cost, professional services,
Legal costs, which is legal.
sales tax transfers. Okay, so going through here, mainly just moving all of our legal to HR. And then, so for the city manager's budget, we did leave city attorney legal costs there. And then publication costs did go down for communications and marketing because we didn't have as much activity for 2021 with all of our recreation services having been either stopped or slowed down significantly. For IT, we did have, it did look like it was slightly under budgeted, so we did add some funding for software licensing, some unbudgeted health benefits, and then we did have repairs and maintenance. We did need extra data space so that people could work from home, so that is a COVID cost that did end up hitting our budget. With HR, that is the large change. It's related to legal costs. So we had union negotiations, advice, and litigation. That is usually where you see the bulk of that hitting. We did have the clerk budget. I went ahead and split that out so that you could see where our legal costs were coming in relation to open records. And then we do have quite a bit going on for our fire service contract. So we do have professional services and legal services that we did need to add in this department. So in here, we did have insurance increases and then different assessments that have gone up. So we did have to increase our non-departmental expenses. We did have to increase the community development budget, but I will say the addition is offset by permit fees. And then we had some adjustments to salaries and benefits. For public works, we just had a decrease, same for recreation. Naturally, recreation, we didn't have as many salary costs because we didn't have as much activity in that department. Okay, so from here, I did want to take a moment to look at our legal breakdown. So I know council have had some questions, and we did note, so the 2021 budget did have unanticipated costs that were related to the COVID-19 pandemic and litigation. So we did encounter unanticipated costs for COVID outbreaks, safety and testing requirements. We had remote work and return to office issues. We had costs related to opening City Hall, meeting in person. It took quite a bit of guidance as Mill Creek was one of the first cities that opened to the public. COVID protocols and requirements were changing daily at that time. And we did want to note that both the public and staff safety was a top priority. So we did have quite a few legal costs related to that. We had additional legal costs related to open records and the Public Record Act lawsuits that were not anticipated. So we've had extensive public record requests that weren't budgeted for. And then we did have unfair labor practice and labor matters that were roughly an additional $317,000. So this is stuff for grievances, bargaining, mediation, tentative settlements. We had the Open Records Act lawsuits. We had open records and the PRA lawsuits. There we go. I'm sorry. That were an additional $300,000 roughly. We have the fire contract legal costs that were about another $100,000. And then we had COVID and additional HR services that were needed that increased the budget by about $165,000. Okay. So from here, I'm gonna jump. And I will say, if I don't cover a slide that is in the packet that you are wanting to see, we can jump to that later. So I'm just gonna jump to surface water. I did want to just kind of hit the larger adjustments and then we can come back if needed. So for the surface water fund, I will note this number right here did not grab the 3.3 million transfer. So that should net a change of $3,308,164. And that is just the bond transfer that I discussed with the auditors, and that should be in the surface water fund because the surface water fund is paying that debt, and that is where the expenses are hitting. So for adjustments on the revenues, you have your bond funding. We have an ecology grant of $50,000 that we're expecting to receive in 2022. And then surface water fees just make up the main revenue source here. So as far as expenses go, we did have quite a bit of changes for like the capital outlay. And then we have had some budgeted positions that were not filled till later on. So that would explain the salaries and benefits adjustments. We do have, I believe, all of those positions filled now with the there's the surface water coordinator that will be starting here, I believe, next week. Okay, and I'm just going to jump. Okay, so then we're going to step onto streets.
Laurel, could I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Going back one slide? On the
Yes.
surface water summary, I'm just curious. So professional services went up 317 or is amended to go up 317.
Yes.
And just to clarify for me exactly what is driving that?
So we do have some adjustments. We have catch basin and pond maintenance that was added, and we have different services that needed to happen for the state, I believe. And so there are professional services that will be provided to help us catch up on those items to bring us into to meet
Compliance.
regulations. Yeah.
We didn't have in the, we're playing on in the budget, but we do need, so we've had to add them back in, and that's why we're going up 317.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, another way to look at that is that the total budget and the amended budget are the same bottom line, but it's a different distribution between internal people doing them and external people doing it. So that's really what's going on there. If you look at the salaries and benefits go down, internal go up, and we're changing some way we do some things in capital outlay. So it's kind of the net effect of the number of changes in terms of the work we're doing and how we're performing it.
Exactly. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so moving to streets, for revenue, really, it's just a small decrease because of motor vehicle fuel tax. And then the expense that is netted here is related to the TIB that is moving to streets because the revenue was received here. So the expense needs to come from here. Okay, and then from here, everything else are smaller. So as far as the Municipal Arts Fund goes, we did have, I went ahead and left the 10 budget. We did estimate that about 6,500 was what it was going to take to finish the historical preservation project and to fund the Great Garden Awards. That does leave 3,500 for additional expenditures. At this point in time, we don't expect to need that, but I didn't want to remove it just in case something came up. Okay, on council contingency fund, we did have the project for the utility box and artwork rack project. We did
I'm sorry,
expect
Laurel,
that.
could you go back again for me? I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
On the Municipal Arts Fund.
Mhm.
Okay, so what was originally in the 21-22 budget
10,000.
for both years? 10,000 total
No, 10,000 net between the 2 years.
between the two for both for the total for both years. In other
Yes.
words, total. Yeah.
Yes.
All
Yeah,
right.
so I'm leaving it. There is a net effect. We're not actually changing the expense level. I was just noting that we do have 3,500 left
Okay.
of the current budget. And I didn't
Uh,
want to adjust it down just because this is an amendment. And while we don't anticipate to need the extra funding, I didn't want to remove it just in case something came up.
My understanding, you probably know better than I do as the finance director, but my understanding was it was $10,000 a year since I've been on, not $5,000 a year. It was been $10,000 a year. So
That
was
might have been
surprising.
previously, but in the budget that was adopted, it was only 10,000 for the 2021 through 2022.
$10,000 a year. I think that was an oversight. So
Yeah, it was
what is
and-
left in the municipal fund for next year? 302?
at this point in time, it looks like we're only going to spend 1,500 in 2021. And so I'm projecting that we have roughly 8,500 to spend in 2022. If you would like, I can add another 10,000. I'm perfectly fine with that because we have a budget a reserve of 46,000, even with the 8,500 that we're planning or that we can spend in 2022.
Yeah, I guess that we just need to know if there's a fund, a municipal arts fund for next year for the A and B board to consider or not consider, you know, should they have a fund or should they not have a fund? Right now you have, you're showing a smaller number than we have. So what you are showing a fund for next year of how many dollars left?
8,500.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
So right here, this is what I'm projecting. Based on what has been spent, this is where we're landing in 2021. And if you would like, I can add another 10,000. And I mean, you don't have to spend it.
No, you don't need to. If you've got 8,500 in the 22 budget for the municipal arts fund, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I misunderstood that as that's the budget, not something that's been expended. That's what's budgeted to be spent. Got it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I-
Councilmember Cavallari has a question too.
Thank you, Mayor. If I can just add to that really quick, because I've gone through this with these additional funding blocks that we have as well in prior years. Just for public consumption, the council contingency fund is I think where we were kind of generally trying to move, where we had these kind of projects, much like the wraps we have coming now, that if it's something we really want to do, the money's there. And I think we're transferring 10,000 this year for the wraps around the utility boxes, and there's still 50 some grand left in that as well. So it's a great option. And I think it just consolidates the money. So we just know how much is there at any given time.
Yes. And if you would like to increase that, I can do that. So if anyone wants to contact me, we can get that adjusted before the next meeting. But this is where, from previous direction, it looked like we were landing. And I will say, initially we had mentioned 8,000 for the utility boxes. I did go ahead and round that to 10, just in case we came in slightly over budget. I didn't want it to make us need another budget amendment. Okay, so for paths and trails, just a very small change for the motor vehicle and fuel tax. And then we just decreased the interest because interest rates are not doing so well right now. Okay, for the drug buy fund, I did go ahead. It does not look like we'll be collecting what was budgeted, so I just went ahead and decreased that. And then I did go ahead and amend expenses based on the trend that had happened in previous years and then what it looked like we were going to be hitting after speaking with our police department. Okay, so for City Hall North, again, smaller changes. We did have a decrease in interest, and then we just had to increase expenses for some repairs and maintenance, and then increase utility rates. For the debt service fund, everything was really, really close. We just needed to add another $1 because it was going to have us come in just slightly negative. It was going to be under $1, but I wanted to make sure that we did come out with a zero balance. Okay, and we did have an increase for the LRF. So I did increase property tax revenue here just to match the trend. For the REIT fund, additional tax revenue was added, and then we did have transfers that had not been completed in the 1920 biennium. So I went ahead and added those just so that we did have a complete CIP for the 21 through 22 budget. So all of this has been budgeted. There was some confusion between the last finance director and our system. And so we just went ahead and fixed that. And then I did add the DRCC transfer so that if we need, we can move forward on that project. Okay, so for equipment replacement, I did not change anything. I just left it as budgeted. And then for the unemployment compensation, I did go ahead and adjust that I think it might be a little high, but I mainly just did not want to have to come back and do a budget amendment if we didn't have to, if it was related to this. I believe we are roughly around 30,000 right now. So this should be plenty, and I don't know that we could have something happen, but it's unlikely. Okay, and from here, I think I am going to pause. Does anyone have any questions on the budget for this hearing? Okay, so we may want to open it to the public.
Now I would like to open for a chance for public testimony. If anyone would like to speak to the budget amendment that was just presented, you have three minutes for each person for testimony. I don't see anyone here in the audience that has raised their hand. I'm going to scroll through and see if there's anyone online that would like to speak regarding the budget amendment. Wishing to speak. So now I will ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
So
Motion
moved.
to- Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Any abstention or all those against? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. The public hearing is closed. Okay, next we are going to open. I'm looking for, okay, next we're going to open the public hearing on the 2020 or 2021-2026 Capital Improvement Plan Amendment. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Oh, did I say it wrong? To open the 2021-2026 Capital Improvement Plan Amendment. I have a motion on the table. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion, a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. The public hearing is now open. I will turn it over to Laurel Gemzo.
All right, so City Council and City staff reviewed preliminary adjustments for the 2021 through 2026 Capital Improvement Plan on November 23rd. So we are going to be looking at just the adjustments for this budget. So it'll only be any projects that are funded for the 2021 through 2022 biennium. So tonight is the public hearing for the CIP amendment, and it provides the public a chance to comment on the proposed amendments. So the slides provided will give a summary of the project changes related to the 21-22 budget. And as we look at the capital project list, it's important to remember that we are not creating a new CIP, and we are only amending projects that are funded in this biennium. So we are currently comfortable with funding levels for this particular biennium and potentially the next biennium. But as we look toward the future, there are projects that are not currently fully funded that will need additional revenues to implement. So here we have just a summary of all of the changes. All of these, except for our county grant project, should have been in your packet, and it has more detail on each of the adjustments. So coming from here, we'll go into a summary. So we are adding a library floor at about $80,000 to our ADA upgrade project. We have removed the historical preservation project because it was not at the $25,000 threshold. We have removed the EOC from this biennium because we do need more research on the location, and that was originally at $38,404. We have added a police radio project to help with radio signal strength and reception, and we're estimating that's going to come in around $80,000. Moving into our Parks and Open Space Capital Fund, we do have the county project here. So I will say I did go ahead. We're looking at the $150,000 grant, and I did go ahead and add $300,000 in additional expenses to this fund. We do have the fund balance for this. If we don't need that much, we do not have to spend it. It's mainly, I just wanted us to have the funding if it was needed. Coming from there, we did go ahead and add an additional $200,000 for DRCC so that we can start moving into our needs analysis and any kind of preliminary master plan work that's needed. We also do have an adjustment for the Silvercrest Park rehab. Mainly the changes were just to reflect grant funding that was received, instead of it coming from this fund balance. Okay, so moving into the road improvement fund. So this is the capital improvement fund related to any kind of road improvement. We did go ahead and revise the crosswalk. It was estimated 140,000. We did change that to 120. For the Jackson High crosswalk, we did go ahead and merge that into the Complete Streets pedestrian improvement. And then down below, we do have this project, and it now has the Jackson High crosswalk, the Heatherwood Drive sidewalk, and the North Creek Drive markings. Okay, and so then we also have capital improvement plans that were related to surface water. So I just wanted to kind of separate this one so everyone understood that while it is a capital project, it's not coming from our capital funds, it's coming from the surface water fund. So on this one, we do have one project that was removed, and then we did go ahead and have a new project for the street storm pipe extension on this. Okay, and then so from there, I just went ahead. We have the capital improvement fund. We can see with these projects, we have amended revenues of $536,676.25. And that is just going to be the completion of the transfer that was not done in the 1920 biennium. And then we do have additional expenses because this is where that surface water bond funding had been placed, and it really did need to be in the surface water. Okay, and then I do have the different projects that are currently funded on the right side of the screen for all of these. Okay, so moving back to Parks and Open Space, again, we have grant funding and a DRCC transfer from the REIT fund. So that's where the additional revenue comes in. And then we have additional expenses that are related to the project adjustments that were listed. And we did get a refund on an exploration park expense. So that is netting there. Okay, and then we have road improvement, additional revenues, mitigation fees, and lower interest decreased our revenues. And then some of the REIT transfer did offset that, but just a net of $9,800. And then on our expenses, the decrease is related to the TIB expenses that we moved to the street fund. Okay, and lastly, the surface water, just we already looked at this for the most part, except I did make a note. We do have revenues coming in. They were adjusted because we have the bond funding that came into this fund, and then we did have interest revenues drop. So that is the net effect. And for expenses, we are not proposing any kind of an adjustment. The offset is coming between the different repairs netting with the project adjustments. From that, I believe that is everything I have. Does anyone have any questions? I'm going to stop share so that I can see you.
Is for, but if I know the next item on the agenda is kind of what we had talked about, does that need to be included in this CIP amendment process now before we close the public hearing? Pickleball courts and whatnot. The $150,000 that we received, I guess, from the county, is that above the 150 that we had last year? Is this new monies?
So as long as we have the expense on here, the adoption will be on the 14th. So as long as you have the funding in there, you'll be okay. I will work with Mike Todd to get a sheet, and we'll have a final project added that doesn't just say it's a county grant project before the budget is adopted. So we don't need to make that decision before we close the hearing.
Excellent. Thank you, Laura.
Yes.
Councilmember Steckler?
I have, Laurel, a quick question. I'm looking for the slide again on the 300,000. I just wanted to understand it better. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to go back to it and find it here.
Hey, Laura, put up that first slide that had the red 150 and the 300. That's also what Councilmember Cavallari was asking about.
Okay, here we go.
That one.
This one. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Slide. That I had the question on. Go ahead, Mayor. I need to find this. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Does anyone else have any questions while we're waiting on Councilmember Steckler?
And I'll just add, the slide that was just brought up answered the question that I was asking, is do we need a separate line item for it? But if this covers our intent, what we're trying to do here, then I'm more than happy. Thank you.
I have a quick question. So we're talking about all the capital improvement projects that are actually funded, but do we have on here capital improvement projects that are not funded? Because I'm always hearing that we have to have them on the capital improvement plan in order to ask for grants, funding from the state and the county. So do we have things on here that are not funded yet so that?
So we have different projects. So for example, I think a good example is this DRCC.
Okay.
So right now we have it funded at $40,000, but we know that $40,000, well, we're moving it to 240, but even 240,000 is not going to result in a completed project. So we do have projects in the 21-22 section of this capital plan, and really the plan overall that is, we only have pieces that are funded. So yes, we do have projects that are not totally funded that we could get grants and funding for later on. It mainly just depends on restrictions for whatever grant funding you're looking at.
We have some things on here that even if we don't have them funded right now, that if the state is giving out funds or the county is giving out funds, we're ready and prepared to say, hey, we do have a great project we'd love to do that's not funded yet. So that was just my reason for my question. Council or Director Todd.
Yeah.
I'd just like to throw it. So I think a really good example last year, we had the Silvercrest Park Rehabilitation Project there, $350,000. It was all originally funded with our own funds. So when the county came to us, and then when the state came to us and said, do you have a project that is kind of like a park that you could use some money for, we were ready to take those funds. And so the adjustment you saw Laurel talk about earlier was reducing the amount of money we use from our own capital improvement fund for parks and replace it with $100,000 from the county and $88,200 from the state. And so that's the ideal situation. We have a project that's beyond the concept phase. It's already scoped out and kind of waiting for money. City engineer Frank Reinhardt and I have been talking about this. We're just not really in a good place to be doing that in many cases. We're kind of running short of good park projects, for instance. We have great pavement preservation projects, but those are not as much fun to fund with some of those funds. But that's something we need to work on. But I would say that Silvercrest Park is a good example of how it works. Laurel mentioned earlier, we have dreams in the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 years to do something at DRCC. Highly unusual that you get money for just planning kinds of things. We'll probably be more eligible for grants for DRCC after we've gone past this next year of some conceptualization, some master planning, some engaging with the community, and have demonstrable things that we can get grants for. Doesn't mean you can't get that kind of grant money, but sometimes you got to look at the kind of grant money you can get, and we need to be ready with projects at a point where we're ready to ask for money. So we need some catching up to get our capital plan where we've got projects just waiting. But if there are opportunities for grants, we're sure happy to work with those who find the grants to see if there's something that fits. But sometimes we just don't have something that's ready to fit. Thanks.
I did. Okay, Laurel, I'm looking at slide 37. That's the one that I wanted clarification on. When we talk about the county grant project, 150,000 additional grant funding and 300,000 estimated additional expenses. Could you explain that for me?
I'm sorry. You said the county grant.
County grant project. I just wanted to understand the 150 funding and 300,000 expense.
Oh, yes. So on the county grant project, originally this was not a project at all. So I have added 150,000 in grant funding that we are expecting to get into this fund.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm increasing revenues by 150,000 and I am increasing expenses by 300,000. And it's strictly, if the city has to do any kind of matching, if whatever the project we land on is more expensive, if we do not need that much, we will not be spending it.
So just to clarify for me, is this the 150,000 that we've been talking about that is coming down the pike from Snohomish?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the additional cash. We don't know what it's going to go for. It might be a matching fund because a lot of them aren't. So you put a $300,000 expense, and then that explains then why. My next question is why not take the 150 and put it against Silvercrest, because the 188,200 doesn't cover the 350 that the city will have to spend. But I can see where if we have to do a matching, that would make that difficult. So I understand that now. That's a question that somebody might have. My last question, all this is, I know as somebody said, we're running out of projects here. I've noticed that there's nothing on here about the Mill Creek Boulevard project. I know we were looking for an update, and that might be something from Director Todd. I know there was some talk about parks in there or something around the reservoir, the holding retention pond. Is there anything that we have coming from that project? Do we have a report coming on that or potential from that or anything on that he knows of? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think we've pushed that out. It was originally scheduled to be talked about this fall. We got too many other things on our agenda. So I think we're talking about doing that in January. That would be an update on the whole Mill Creek Boulevard sub-area study. Remember, we worked with a community group and got some various inputs and recommendations. And so those recommendations need to come to council and decide whether we're going to have that be something we wrap into our comp plan amendment that will happen on a timeline towards 2024. And yes, indeed, you're correct. We've been kind of holding off on doing some simple repaving and stormwater repairs on Mill Creek Boulevard, because if we came back and said it'd be great to change the streetscape, let's make that a better, front door to Mill Creek Town Center, we would indeed want to make some changes there. We are really, really early, much too early to be talking about applying any money to it because this is early concept. So we get these dreams, they're cool dreams, but they're not at the point where you can get grant funds, because once you get grant funds, there's an expectation you build something and deliver it. And so it's way too early for those kinds of funds, but not a bad idea for the future.
We cannot hear the council chamber.
We're getting some mic delays.
We're still hearing nothing.
Testing 1 2, testing 1 2.
We can hear that.
Someone else want to check their mic?
Testing.
I could hear Martin.
We did not hear Stephanie.
That's right.
Can you hear me now if I hit?
Can you
the-
hear
Yes.
me speaking? Can you hear John Steckler speaking?
Yes.
And Stephanie.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Duque has a question.
Yes, thank you. So it was helpful for me to hear about the understanding between if it's scoping out or, we're looking for that funding. So where in the process, for example, like from the Parks Board, when they have their ideas and they're sharing our arts and beautification, what is the appropriate step, or when we hear from team members, what is the appropriate step to be able to then get onto this list if they're not scoped out yet? Because that's what, to get here, from my understanding from Director Todd, is that's the point. So what does that look like beforehand? And does that mean, in addition, does that mean that these amendments can be added later like we've been doing since this is for 2021 to 2026?
Yeah, good question. So here's the normal process. In a normal, remember, we got a biennial budget. So our budget that we're in is 21-22. The next one will be 23-24. So looking forward, around March or April, Laurel will ring the bell and we'll start the budget process for the 23-24 biennium. Part of that will be development of a CIP, the capital improvement project for 23 through 28. And that would be the time we would kind of say, hey, what are the ideas? What do we want to put into our plan? And so the right time to bring up a new project is in that cycle when we have a chance to look at those projects, scope them out, and then prioritize them, working with you and the amount of money we can get from Laurel and grant sources to say, what can we do in that 6-year plan, and more specifically in the first 2 years, which goes into our biennial budget. What we're suffering from is during COVID and the departure of staff leading into the 21-22 budget, we did not do that process. So our 21-22 process didn't have any inputs other than to roll the old projects that weren't done in 19 and 20 forward. So we're stuck with a void in our whole system because of COVID and staff departure. So that's what it feels like we're stuck in the mud, and we are. So we're trying to catch up. So that's why right now, if the county council says, hey, we got $150,000, what's a great park project? We're kind of going, we don't have one in our CIP right now, other than, as Councilmember Steckler pointed out, we still have the Silvercrest Park project, but I'm not sure if the county wants to give another amount of money to that same project to which they've already given money. That's the trick. And so that's why you'll see in our next discussion here, we'll be talking about that. We're kind of doing this backwards, where we got some money and we're trying to find a project to go with it. I hope that kind of explains. We're trying to recover from COVID is what it is.
because I know at the last week's meeting, we talked about, oh, we'll send you a list of, ideas we had, but then hearing you say the word scope, that we have, the scope to it, I'm like, well, that's the most important part. So these other plans that we have, it doesn't make sense to go now. So thank you for clarifying and appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, thanks.
Questions? Laurel, are you ready for me to open it up to the public for questions?
Yes.
Perfect. I'd like to open this up now for public testimony. If anyone would like to speak or ask questions regarding the 2021, 2026 capital improvement plan amendment, then you have 3 minutes. I don't see anyone in here in the audience with their hand raised. Anyone online, would you like to speak? Everyone's quiet tonight. All right, with that, no one has their hand raised, so I will ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
against? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. The public hearing has been closed. Thank you. Up on the agenda and it just moved on me, so give me just a second. We are going to move on to old business, and I have first up the potential grant from Snohomish County. Director Todd.
Mike, you want me to go ahead? Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just wanted to mention a few things. I wanted to clarify the prior discussion about the 150K coming from Snohomish County, the proposed money. There's 2 things, and Laurel Gims, our finance director, did allude to the fact that those are funded. When those projects do get identified they are in our CIP under our Parks and Open Space Fund. So when we do identify specifically, after we get those definitions and we identify what those projects are, we will create those line items in that project. And the second thing I want to mention is in our prior council meeting, I think Councilmember Duque was alluding to this a bit. She did want to submit a list of projects. The second point is that we will be working with you directly and reach out to you with that list for suitable projects for that 150K. Now I'll hand it over to our Public Works Director, Michael Todd.
Thank you. A couple of comments. If you take a look at the memo in your packet, I did not prepare a formal presentation. We mostly got some sketches I want to show you. But to go back a little bit, remember this is an offer from Councilmember Mead at the county council level. In general, I think each council district has an opportunity to use some of their REIT funds to put back out to the cities for improvements, and it's generally around the recreation projects. It comes from the park and recreation element of their comprehensive plan. In the past, a couple of years ago, there was an indication that the county council was okay with pedestrian safety improvements, and remember that's where the old Jackson High School project got started. We didn't get money for that in the end, but that's where that got started. So we think that may also qualify. We are waiting for more clarification from the county about the applicability of those potential funds. We don't really know. They're really designed for park projects. That's why Silvercrest Park worked perfectly, but pedestrian safety improvements that we've talked about might be tougher. Over the last couple of weeks, we've kind of tossed around a couple of ideas. As we just talked about a few moments ago, our current plan is not really in a good spot for having good choices for approved projects that are already at the phase where we know it's going to be $325,000 and we're looking for funding to do it. So we're struggling. We're kind of coming at this with some money and some ideas. So as you just heard, Laurel said, if we get 150, it might take another 150, pure guess, to do a whole project for $300,000. There is not a match requirement that we are aware of in the county funding. There hasn't been in the past. So we probably don't have to match dollar for dollar. Some grants are like that. We probably don't have to match dollar for dollar, But her comment about the $300,000 is more recognition that highly unlikely we can come up with a project that costs exactly 150. So it probably will cost us some of our own money. And her discussion was, we do have other money in our parks fund. So that shouldn't stop us from dreaming a little bit bigger, but we just don't know what that project would be yet. We do have an opportunity to amend our CRP. We're talking about tonight. We can amend it next week. But we are running out of time to get a really good idea. With that, I want to bring up the 3 different ideas. I'm going to share my screen and show you some sketches for the 3 different ideas we've been kicking around and a little bit of history. Can you see the Cougar Park master plan document that looks like it's from 2005? Is that showing for folks? Look, I'm getting a head nod there. Thank you. Apologies.
Yes.
I can't see what you're seeing. So this is, remember there's talk about a Cougar Park 2. So we look back in history. This is the original sketch for the master plan that happened in August 2005 when Cougar Park was first being conceptualized. At the time, they talk about a bathroom building at the front, some play structure, open lawn, working around a wetland back in this corner, working around a wet, deep area in this corner. And I had this right here. It says future hard surface court, future trails, future activity area. So that was the original dream. My memory isn't perfect, but I was on the park board at the time and then later on council when this was being discussed. And I think what happened at the time was we said this was troublesome because there's a lot of trees in here. And at the time, the church to the north wasn't as developed. It's a lot of trees, and there was concern about the visibility of a basketball court, a volleyball court, the things that were talked about at that time in terms of a hard surface court area here. So we went from that to when they actually drew up the drawings. If I can get this to move to the next one. Resume slideshow. I apologize. Why will this not go? There we go. This was the next level of drawings. Again, shows that bathroom building, open lawn. Here's the wetlands delineated a little bit better. In this area back here, I'll zoom in on that in a minute, but this no longer had a hard surface area. It was proposing some activity back here. And the next slide you'll see is this object here was the slide. And so that's what happened in terms of what was being developed and being executed. At the time we decided to execute, we as a city decided to execute only the front part of the park. And so that slide got moved into an update of the project in 2012. Slide moved from here on that back section up to the front lawn section up here. And that's the way the park sits right now. So this talk we have of Cougar Park 2, the Cougar Park 2 plan never really happened. There's nothing much more than what you see here in terms of our history. Okay, jumping ahead, the discussion was pickleball courts. So what does it take to make a pickleball court? So here's a description of a pickleball court to give you a sense of how big it is. It's 44 by 20 overall. It has a net that is similar to a tennis net, but it is lower than a tennis net. But in many cases, people play pickleball on tennis courts. So this next picture is a depiction of how that's typically done. And in fact, this is what goes on with an asterisk at Heron Park. In some previous iteration of resurfacing the Heron Park court with that green surface and putting it on the tennis lines, there are orange lines for pickleball on that existing tennis court. Somehow they missed this line, the baseline on this side and that side. And so someone has chalked those in, but that is the court that exists today for pickleball in Mill Creek. We could do that similar thing at the other tennis court in town, which is Highland Park. And so earlier people were talking about a quick fix. How could we do this? Pickleball was exciting. It would be pretty quick once we get some dry weather to talk to a court surfacing contractor and have them put in the lines, the rest of the lines at Heron Park, and put these lines in at Highland Park. So that doesn't spend $150,000, but it gets us 2 pickleball courts pretty quickly. The other thing people sometimes do is they put the pickleball court crosswise. If you do that, it requires extra nets, portable nets. We don't want to go there because that's something that will get lost or broken or misplaced. So as far as pickleball goes, that is an approach. If we decide we want to go, let's build a new pickleball court, I'm going to point you back to this wetland, which was delineated with a 50-foot boundary, a buffer based on the category of that wetland back in 2005. Wetlands typically don't shrink, they typically grow. The requirements typically go up. So the amount of dry area here is probably pretty small. That is not big enough for a pickleball court, for a pair of pickleball courts. It might fit one. This is also wet and not flat over here. So the caveat from our city engineer is if you make impervious surface of more than 2,000 square feet, which is a pickleball court, by the time you put some area around it, then you got to worry about surface water, both from a water flow control standpoint and from a water quality standpoint. So what sounds like an easy project, throwing down some pavement, throwing up a fence, throwing up a net, putting down some lines, might be done for $150,000 or it might be $500,000. It depends on how much you've got to do with surface water. And because that site has got that wetland, that is a big unknown. So not good news for people who are dreaming about just throwing a court in at Cougar Park if we're talking about this original dream of a different area. If we said, let's tear up the lawn at one of our existing parks and do that, we're still going to run into that surface water issue. We have to deal with surface water things, and that gets tough. So we don't have good numbers on that. So that's not great news on the pickleball, but that pickleball idea is the one that probably best fits the original county stipulation that's being focused on recreational or access to recreational kinds of facilities. Okay, jumping ahead, one other idea we've talked about is
Director Todd, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question.
Certainly.
I was curious, how much would it typically cost for us to do a study to analyze how much available land is left over there around Cougar Park to actually put a pickleball court in?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a couple of different wetland specialists that we have on retainer that we work with a lot. I would, just like we did up at DRCC, we had the wetland consultant go out and redelineate the wetlands. That was a couple $1,000. This is so old, I bet they'd have to start over again. I think we're probably talking $5,000 to $10,000 in a month or two, depending on their scheduling. This is the wet time of year. I'm not sure if they're busy or not, but it's probably a couple of months and $5,000 or $10,000 to find out about the wetlands. That would then tell us how much space is left over. City engineer Frank Reinhardt happens to be a hydrogeologist, and so he is smarter than most folks about what you do with the water. That's also why he's very cautious in saying, and when I said, could you do it for 150? He said, well, I don't know. Could you do it for 300? I don't know. So he's being cautious because we don't want to back into a giant project. But getting back to your question, with a small amount of money, we could find out some more about that. And in the past, our concern was the visibility. That's changed a little bit with the Venture Church to the north, but that still is kind of hidden away from the main parking area, the main visibility that the police use for seeing that park.
Grant be able to be used for part of, to help fund that, just finding out that information?
I would think so. I mean, typically, the last time we had one of these county grants was Heron Park. They contributed $100,000, I think it was, towards the $400,000 rehabbing that. And so they wanted to see the park final done before they would reimburse us the $100,000 they said they would give us.
Right.
So during the course of the project, we might spend 5 on this, 20 on that, 50 on that, and add up to 150. They won't give us that check until the project is done, that they can check that it's done and there's a ribbon to be cut, basically.
Okay.
And they typically have had 2 years in their cycle. So if we got this money for the 22 award, it would be good for 22 and 23 in most cases.
Okay.
So that's why we have 2 years to execute on these things. And it takes the 2 years starting from scratch.
Thank you. Councilmember Cavallari has a question as well.
Certainly.
Thank you, Mayor. Director Todd, so as it stands, would your best guess be that we at least have the space for 1 court and potentially 2? That's the ball that's up in the air.
Well, there might be space for 1 there. I don't think there's space for 2. My recollection was this was just barely enough for a basketball court, and putting 2 courts with enough spacing and a room around them and a fence and then the path and the benches and whatever else you'd want to have.
Right.
It may be where it ripples into right here. Remember this wetland, you got to stay 50 feet away. Or if it's a higher category, if it's a more intense wetland now, that buffer may wipe it out entirely. That might be a 100-foot buffer now. That's the trick. That's why you got to have the wetland biologist take a look at it with today's water conditions versus 2005 when they were doing this in the first place.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Other questions on pickleball?
Question. So it seems, that Cougar might not be the best fit. What about Pine Meadows Park? Has there been, any other looks at other parks that might have the space?
Have not looked at that yet. And I think anytime you look at changing a park, then you say, what are we using it for today? And you're right, Pine Meadow Park is one that has quite a big grassy area. I think we would probably want to say, okay, what do we use that grassy area for now? I know it's one of the Tiny Tots soccer programs is out there. And so you kind of hate to hack it up with a hard surface court with a fence around it if it's also an open space for kids to play touch football or whatever. So you kind of got to balance the priority of these different things. So I think the original idea of tucking in somewhere had merit because it wasn't going to tear up a big open space. But that would be, and we just haven't looked for other places yet.
With Cougar Park, my one concern was if it was the open lawn, because I see that so frequently used by kids, flag football, soccer, and it just so happens, because this is something that we have discussed before in the Parks and Recreation Board, Pine Meadows, there is a huge section that is generally devoted to I can't remember the name of the soccer program, but we've used it before with the recreational.
Yeah.
But there is so much more that's additional, and there's also good parking there versus at Cougar Park. So that's why I didn't know if that had been looked at.
No, frankly, yeah, this came up pretty rapidly. And the question was, what about Cougar Park 2? That's why I went looking for the Cougar Park piece of it. But we also could look at another park area. And you're right, Pine Meadow is fairly flat. Still might run into surface water stuff, the dang surface water stuff, but it might be easier there because it's not next to a wetland. It's not a bad idea. I'm going to move ahead to the second set of ideas was on 35th, we've got this long stretch. Someday, you're seeing this picture, aren't you? Yeah, thanks. This right now is the farm's private property, but their dream is to have that be a wetland sanctuary that someday the park, they will open it to the public here next spring. But someday that might become something the city would have as a wetland sanctuary area. Even without us owning this, there's still quite a few people jaywalking across the road here, and it's kind of dangerous. And we've had some fatal accidents. Those fatal accidents have been cars and fences and cars and cars. They've not been pedestrians, thank goodness. But there's some discussion about would we like to have crosswalks somewhere between 132nd up on the north and 148th down on the south, down by the school. There's not crosswalks other places. So somewhere between Silvercrest Drive, 139th, 141st, and 144th, the entrance to Highland Trails, one or more of those places would make sense to have a protected semi-protected crosswalk. Maybe one of these entrances to North Point is the logical place because having a cross section at an intersection, having a crosswalk in an intersection is a lot easier to justify than a mid-block crossing. So that's why I'm talking very carefully about a crosswalk at one of these intersections. How would that look? This is a crude picture, I apologize, but this is 35th down by Tambar Creek Park, south of Mill Creek, which has the same road profile. It's that same wide profile where people can go way too fast. So the way the county dealt with that at Tambar Park is they built in they use this median island as a pedestrian refuge, and they've got landings on each side. And here's a picture of what it looks like when you're driving to it. So you got the RRFBs in the center and on each side. And that design might work pretty well at one of those entrances into North Creek Park, into North Point and Exploration Park. That kind of project, if pedestrian safety improvements are within what the county is willing to do, and maybe it's under the auspices of this is connecting people to recreational facilities. In this case, it's a passive facility of the wetland sanctuary. That might also qualify. I guess it would, but we don't have a definitive answer back from the county. But that's why that idea is also in there. That is something again, it's not fully scoped, but for $150,000 or a little bit more, we probably could put in one or easily one, maybe even two crosswalks to address pedestrian safety here. Questions on the 35th Avenue idea? I'm not seeing yeses. I'm seeing. Councilmember Duque, I can't hear you again. I apologize. It's not your fault.
Mic check.
Yeah, now it can. Go ahead.
I can hear kind of a little bit more of the echo, so I'll just I'll make sure to pay attention to that. This is I'm very excited for this project, and I just wanted to point that out. I know that within the Parks and Recreation Board, this is something that we've talked about, even though it's not necessarily a project that Parks Board would handle, but it's the continuation, the connection between Exploration Park to to Buffalo Park. And having that, ability. For those who may not be aware, a good chunk of this area that you're looking at on the map to the left was redistricted out of Mill Creek Elementary and moved to Penny Creek Elementary. It happens to be where I live, this neighborhood that we're looking at. So while we do get bussed in because of crossing 132nd is a heavy area, there are a lot of people who do still walk to Penny Creek, which is just north of the farm area. I see where you're moving the mouse. Thank you so much. Yeah. So I think it's really important here, and I think getting the ball rolling and having that traffic study, because I don't know, I'm not a professional. I don't know where the right place is for the line. I mean, I could tell you Pacific Topsoil's traffic is horrendous, so that might not be the best bet, but getting the traffic study to handle this. I know I've spoken to many of my neighbors about this. As soon as I won the election, that was immediately, I had 3 people reach out to me in emails. Remember that thing we talked about? And I agreed with them because I live here. So this is something that I'm very excited to see if it would be covered, especially because now we know from the Jackson crosswalk about how we need that traffic study to be able to determine to get these steps rolling. So thank you very much for sharing this.
Councilmember Cavallari.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me, Director Todd?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, we've spoken about this a few times, and regardless whether or not the $150,000 covers this, I think it's appropriate to get it on our CIP amendments. Let's not forget, we still have potential ARPA funds to use to fund this project. So it's not like we don't have money to take care of safety features. I think your point about the region growing exponentially as it is we're a little bit behind the times here, and we have had a couple of fatalities here recently, and all that did, I'm not saying anyone's at fault, but it did shine a light on a glaring problem that we've seen, and it's only going to get worse as the population continues to increase in that dense area along 35th. So at the very least, I think that no matter what we do here, it should be included in the CIP amendment. Thank you.
100% agree. This is the kind of thing we'll talk about in the 23-24 budget cycle, because you're exactly right. This is the place, this is a prime spot for us to be talking about that. Thank you. I'm going to move on to the last idea or go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I also want to reiterate that when I was out doorbelling this summer, this whole area, especially in North Point, everybody was telling us that they really needed a crosswalk right there, that they were crossing and that it was dangerous coming right outside of North Point, to the point that if you ask Cora what everybody needs in the city, she's going to tell you they need some crosswalks, because that's how much we heard it over there. So this is a safety issue, I feel like, for the residents in North Point, because they are crossing that street with or without the crosswalk, and it's dangerous. So I would like to see this added on regardless as well. And depending on how our pickleball goes out, because everyone is telling us they want pickleball, and I think that would be fun. I think we should look at possibly using a grant to take care of a crosswalk right here, so that those residents that live in the North Point area can be crossing the street safely.
Am I reading this correct? Okay, should I move on to the last idea here? When we were looking at our list.
Councilmember Allison has a question.
Go ahead, Councilmember.
So would the traffic study also include recommendations about what kind of a crosswalk would best serve that area?
Yeah, Councilmember Allison. So we're talking about, particularly if you do a mid-block crossing, a place where traffic is not turning, you have to do a study Because if you put one in and it wasn't warranted, then you're open to lawsuits if you haven't done the study. So it got really complicated at Jackson because it wasn't at a crosswalk. It wasn't an intersection. At an intersection, it's a little bit easier to justify it, but we probably still want to look at the speed vehicles are traveling, how much turning traffic is going on, to make sure you design the right thing. So you use that traffic study opportunity to say, okay, what's the proper design? Are you accommodating left turn traffic, right turn traffic? How many people are walking, et cetera? So it informs your design. You shouldn't just guess. And so we typically will turn to a design firm who's good at traffic engineering in the first place and at design of pedestrian improvements like we've done for the current Complete Streets project. I'm not sure if I answered your question. I apologize.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
All right, I don't see anyone else ready for questions. You can move on.
Okay, and the last one was, we said, okay, what's our project that's most ready to go? And the reason that this looks like an engineering drawing as it is, that's most ready to go. You may or may not be aware, but if you go in the back half of the library, it was added in, I think, 1989 or something like that. Much of the area of the library, about 3,000 square feet on the back, was added on. When they added it on, the design met the specifications. It got all of its inspections, but somehow the plywood that was used on the floor was 1/8 of an inch too thin, and it was not what's called rated panels. And so you bend a piece of plywood over 20 years with books and people, and all the internal glue layers give up, and it's really springy. So no one's going to fall through the floor, but it is kind of spooky in there. Once we pulled up the floor, looked underneath. We were concerned there was structural areas underneath that. It is not a structural water problem. It is just that surface. So this is fairly simple, but it's pulling up 100 sheets of plywood and putting down 100 sheets of plywood. But instead of just doing it the way it was, we're going to double up the joists. So it's on the order of $40,000. Then add government prices onto it, it might be 50 or 60. So Laurel, you saw earlier, put $80,000 in there to make sure we've got enough. We're working with Snow Isle Libraries this year, 2022, to figure out a time. They want to close the library, move all the books, tear up all the carpet, put down new flooring, new insulation, put down new carpet, redo the library. So we're working with them to do it. But this is a place where we could use money. And maybe the county council member is saying, hey, this is great. It not only serves the citizens of Mill Creek, but that is also the busiest library in this whole system in terms of books that are checked in and out. We're busier than Linwood, which is the biggest library. It's absolutely crazy. Anybody who's been in there, it's a very popular library. So fixing this library is very important. We have a requirement that's our building that we let the library use, but we're responsible for the outside envelope. So we have to fix this. And this would be a place the money could go. Again, this is a long stretch. I don't know if the county would allow the money to be used there, but this is the one that's easiest to say, it is a project we will do. We could use money for it. And I'll take that down because that's not very exciting. I'm excited by that picture, but you probably aren't. Takes a different kind of person to like that kind of drawing. Comments or questions, or, I guess I'll wrap it up to say, again, I put a question back in the Councilmember Mead in just the last couple of days. He was able to do a placeholder in the county budgeting process that somehow got his foot in the door. I don't know exactly when we have to codify that, but in general, the rule is it has to be in the county CIP, adopted CIP, and it has to be in ours. I don't know what they could have possibly put in their CIP that would look like anything we're going to do because we have not exchanged notes enough. So there must be either what he put in there as a placeholder is adequate, or we're going to have to pull some tricky stuff later. We're in that same position where ideally we would have a project, we would jam it in there when we adopt the CIP amendment next week, and we go off and do it. But what I told you earlier is I don't know exactly what a pickleball project would look like, or what a 35th Avenue sidewalk project or a library project would look like, or something different. We may just have to roll the dice. Ideally, we'll find out something from the county in the next week, and I give you better advice next week. And we may just have to roll the dice and then hope that if it doesn't work, that we'll adjust later. We also, I'm going to tell you that priority-wise, every time we pick a new project, this is a cool new project called pickleball, or it's called 35th Avenue it's going to impact our ability to pave roads or fix sidewalks or fix stormwater pipes. I only have so many engineers who can manage so many projects. And that's one of the things, new council members didn't hear this, but last year we reflected on the staff took on twice as many projects in the prior biennium than they'd ever done before. And it didn't work out well. Part of it was COVID, but part of it was just too many things. You can only have so many balls there at once. So I'm being very careful and cautious to say, just one more project, even if you got the money, that just one more sometimes doesn't work very well. So we need to be cautious about how our staffing lines up with this too. I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor.
What direction do you need from us this evening?
I think we've had a good discussion. I think if these three ideas are the ones you want me to at least ask the county, do these qualify? I think that's the most important thing. I'm trying to get an answer from the county. I did hear new input tonight that we should look at. It's only a couple of days, but we'll tromp out there and look at Pine Meadow Park, because maybe there's a corner of that park that would be an alternate location if we want to do pickleball, because I don't think Cougar is going to work very well. And that might be a simpler project to do. If you got other ideas we haven't thought of at all, I guess we are open to those ideas, but we have very few hours before we have to put together a packet for you guys for next Tuesday. So there's not much time to invent something new. But if
Councilmember Steckler has a
tonight,
question.
let us know.
Councilmember Steckler has a question.
Thank you, Director Todd. All of these ideas are great ideas. Love them all. All of them are very valuable. I think I don't have any problem with any of them. I know one of the comments you said was, could you bring some ideas? And I had one idea that I wanted to bring to you. I think might work. One, it's something we've talked about in the past too. I know the county supports helping their cities to accomplish this. And it does fit with the green spaces concept of this money that they're allocating. And that is that we've long talked about wanting to update our signage around the city because it's quite old, 30 years old and quite dated. And we could do something to really use this money to update it, give it a more contemporary look, make it a little more pride for all of the citizens about Mill Creek. And it is a green space allocation. I don't know if it would take how much of the money it would take, but it's just one I would suggest, because I know the county has recognition of assisting cities with their signage and recognition to the public. And I know we've talked about it, but it is not an RCIP. But just a suggestion I wanted to throw out to you.
If there's other interest in that, I'm not opposed to that. You want me to also ask Councilmember Mead if that's how far that stretches it?
Councilmember Cavallari.
I thought we allocated 50 grand or something for that to do exactly what Councilmember Steckler's talking about. Director Todd, you may have been you were on the council then. Do you recollect that? Didn't we budget? I don't know. I'll say 40 to 60 grand. I think we put some aside for exactly that.
Yeah, Laurel may beat me to it. There is a CIP project. It isn't amended, so it's not in her pile of stuff, but there was a CIP project for citywide entrance updates or something or other. We have not done much work. We didn't have a marketing and communication staff. That's where that project really originally came from 3 or 4 years ago. But that is, there's an idea is kind of there. That would be fairly quick to design and implement compared to some other things, if we're replicating our existing signs. I think the original proposal from previous Marcom director was whole new logo, whole new identity, new colors, etc. That's a bigger project. But if we said we've got a few entrance spots where we've got the old wood signs, we want to put the new metal signs in, we could do that. And so I think there is some money for that, but then again, that'd be a project against which we could apply a grant. That's a better situation than new project.
Good point of that is that Councilman Cavallari brings up, that's an existing CIP project.
Yeah.
So that's a benefit. And I would ask that you approach Councilman Mead with that.
I'll ask them that as well. I can't pull it up very easily here, but it's basically their policy is general policy plan, Parks and Recreation goal PR1 includes a component to provide recreation services to Snohomish County. So that's the overarching thing for this grant money, and it says to increase recreational opportunities and facility capacity. I don't think signs fits very well, but I don't know how much they can stretch. But
Councilmember Duque?
I think the wayfinding signs that we have been working on would have been a perfect fit. But it turned out, from my understanding, to not be as expensive that we thought. And so, or navigational signs, I'll say, for people. So those are the signs that while you're driving to a park, we did an update to it earlier this year that you got the previous council approved that I worked on. But I think that would make sense, that would fit into it. But it turned out, I don't think that was a lot of money, but
yeah, $10,000 to buy the signs, and Matthew's going to put them in. Yeah. Okay, well, I think I've got the direction I need. I'll bring some more information back to you next week. Hopefully the county can give us some guidance, or we'll just have to roll the dice next week and put something in and see what happens. But I'm hoping, I'll tell you, I'm hoping the money is for real. Just to let you know, we don't have the money for Silvercrest Park signed off by the county either, and that's been a year. So just as we have a hard time getting things signed, they do too. So don't count your chickens until you got the check in. Not the foam check, but the real check is what Laurel would tell us. Thank you.
We move on to new business, and we have Chief Young to discuss prosecution service agreement. Chief? I don't see him.
All right, there we go.
There
Sorry
he is.
about that. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and good evening, members of the council. The police department has partnered with Zachar and Thomas to provide prosecution services for the city of Mill Creek for the past several years. Our current contract expires on December 31st of 2021. Additionally, on January 1st of 2022, the firm will undergo a name change to Zachar, Stock, and Krebs. This is due to the retirement of Jimmy Zachar Sr., so we wish him a happy and healthy retirement. And I think he's going down to Florida, so I'm a little bit jealous, because it's going to be much nicer weather down there. But anyway, the police department is seeking to renew the service agreement with Zachar, Stock, and Krebs for prosecution services, and respectfully recommends and requests council authorize the interim city manager to enter into a contract so that we can execute that contract. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Mayor, on that basis, I'd like to make a motion. Motion to direct the city manager to approve, enter into agreement with Zachar, Stock, and Krebs for prosecution and consulting services for the city of Mill Creek.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I
Anyone against? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Mayor, is that the resolution that was in the packet?
Yes, it was the proposed motion that we were given, yes.
Okay, and it just for the record, if we could just recite the resolution number, that would be great.
Oh, resolution number.
2021-615.
Is that all you need, Grant?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on, we have professional services contract with Safe Built for building official plan review and building and engineering inspections not to exceed $250,000. Tom Rogers, planning manager.
Good evening, members of the council. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
you can. Thank you.
Okay, so the item tonight is to adopt a resolution authorizing the interim city manager to execute a contract for professional services with Safe Built. Safe Built provides building official, plan review, and building and engineering inspections for the city. As a way of background, the city historically has had an in-house building official, and we had that person in place until 2019 when our existing building official went to Snohomish County to take the building official job with the county. And at that time, we went to using a contract services as we tried to get a full-time building official. Effort to recruit the building official was unsuccessful, and then COVID hit. So we've been using a consultant service since 2019 exclusively to do all of our building inspections and plan reviews and making calls the building official has to do. The current contract with Safe Built, we amended it, I think last year in 2020 to go up to $250,000. It expires at the end of this year. Right now, we've spent about $230,000 of that $250,000. Since it expires at the end of this year, we need to basically enter into another agreement that mirrors that contract. The rates have not gone up. The fee structure is still the same. We think that there's enough money proposed at $250,000 to carry us through the next 2-year period. So that would be December 31st, 2023. And so it's important to realize that all these fees that we're spending are basically offset by the fees that they pay for the building permits and plan reviews. So there really is this is already paid for by as the fees that the developers or the people that are getting building permits submit to the city. This contract would carry us through for the next 2 years, and we need this contract to continue providing services starting on January 1st. One of the things that we are still looking at as staff is whether or not we should go back to trying to recruit a full-time building official. We believe that the cost will be very similar, but we get the benefits of better service, more flexible service for our customers, and also added tasks for the same money. And that's a decision for a later date. Right now, we are recommending that the council authorize interim city manager to sign the new contract that would extend the ability to use Safe Built for the next 2 years. If we did get a full-time building official as a city employee, this contract could still be in place to fill in for those times of training or unexpected sickness or vacations, things like that. We wouldn't have to spend the $250,000. So the contract would serve both purposes. With that, I'm able to take any questions you have.
Councilmember Steckler.
Mayor, based on the information we've seen, I'd like to propose a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the interim city manager to execute a contract for professional services with Safe Built for building official, plan review, and building and engineering inspections not to exceed $250,000.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All
I
those
guess
in-
just add the resolution number.
Oh, yeah, do we need the resolution number?
I looked all over, couldn't find it.
2021-616.
2021
616.
616.
Perfect. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
All right, so now we are going to move on to proposed new initiatives. The city position regarding voter approval for county proposed sales tax. I am speaking to this for Mayor Pro Tem, I am Mayor Pro Tem, for Mayor Holzclaw, who was the person who wanted to bring this new initiative to our attention. So I'm going to do the best I can to tee us up with the proper information and set us up for this discussion. Everyone should have received a copy of a letter. And so I want to start off with a little bit of information so we don't want to confuse people of what we're actually discussing this evening. This is actually regarding the county council. A little bit of background information. There's House Bill 1590 was passed that gave the county council the ability to pass a councilmatic sales tax to help for affordable housing. In the county, there are over 33% of households are cost burdened. And as of 2019, Snohomish County needed 127,215 additional units of housing. So with this in mind, the county council is discussing taking up passing a councilmatic tax that they are allowed to do through HB 1590. And if they do pass this, they will join Jefferson, King, Skagit, Spokane, Whatcom counties in doing so. So I want to make it clear that this is not a tax that Mill Creek is discussing taking up for ourselves. This is a tax that the county council is discussing passing. Mayor Holtzclaw had received the letter that all of you have received. And a council member asked that whether or not we would like to sign on to this letter as a council or not. Mayor Holtzclaw is going to speak to this himself in his personal capacity and wanted me to bring it to everyone to find out your thoughts on whether or not the council should sign on to this letter as a council. I'm going to take privilege real quick to set this up too for myself. I think we need to have a few considerations as we're discussing this. I have been told that the majority of the county council is passing this. I think it's important for us as a council to remember that we work with the county council for funding and for other things that we need, and we need to maintain a good working relationship with them. I think that I personally received a letter asking us to support the tax increase. So I feel that we're being asked as a council of Mill Creek to jump into county council business and get into a fight of county council members, which makes me a little bit uncomfortable because I feel like they're asking us to choose sides in their discussion on something that we are not allowed to enact and have no business being part of. So I just want to set up, that's my personal opinion. And I prefer as a council that we would stay out of it and let the county council disagreements be their disagreements and we not take a stand either way. But with that, I am bringing it forward for Mayor Holtzclaw as a new initiative and open it up to discussion to find out what everybody else thinks about it. And with that, I will start with Councilmember Cavallari.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Do you want to, so the public has it, do we want to read this into the record so they understand what it is?
That's a great question. Do you think we need to read the letter that we're being asked to?
I mean, if we're all being asked to sign on it and we're going to take a position one way or the other, it might be appropriate. If you just want to have us talk onto the idea of a tax that doesn't go to a vote of the people, I'm happy to do that as well.
That's a great question. I don't think we need to read into the letter yet. Let's discuss what we feel like we should do and come to a consensus on that, because this is just our new initiative. And then it may be that we need to give further guidance to staff to bring back to us next time, and that way can be in the packet for everyone to see and go over. So let's discuss it first.
Okay,
What we want to do. You're welcome.
Thank you for the clarification. Fair enough. As the public may or may not understand, there is, and this is my position as a council member and a representative here in Mill Creek, there is a proposed sales tax increase proposed by the county council to address homelessness. And it's kind of I haven't seen the initial proposal. I think I received an email today from the county executive for the first time. So it was just one of those, it just had a blanket to address homelessness header on it. So that's what the tax is for. I'm alarmed. I'm alarmed. First of all, at potentially bypassing the people. This isn't a property tax. My personal position is much like the law and justice tax that the citizens pass, that it go to a vote if you're going to pass a new sales tax. Cities like Seattle, I mean, even down in Portland, they have dedicated permanent resources addressing homeless, and look at those awful examples of wasted resources. Public, our consumer price index is now at a little over 9.5%. Inflation is outpacing wage growth for almost a full year at 6.5%. We just raised property taxes as a council, and the county is supposed to do that as well at 2.5%. I just don't know where it stops. I think this sales tax initiative by the county council is incredibly tone deaf. I think it's inappropriate at this time without a proper plan or even really the nuts and bolts of it. Homelessness is really, I mean, it's an awful conversation to have, but it is really, mental health is the real conversation that needs to be had. And if you are going to have serious conversations to address homelessness instead of just trying to throw some money at it, then that is something I would certainly entertain. I will urge my colleagues on the dais to frown down on even entertaining this notion of a tax. And if you have a chance to speak to your elected leaders, please do that. I've received several phone calls, several texts. You didn't have to sway me. It should always come down to the people. And again, I think the best words I can give it is tone deaf. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cavallari. Would anyone else like to weigh in? Councilmember Steckler?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this is a very, very touchy subject. As you said at the beginning, I don't like it when we are telling the legislature how to propose laws, but this is a little bit different. I do not support increasing our sales tax. That's something I always want to try to avoid. That has repercussions that can be damaging to our economy. And that to me is one of the things we need to protect as public officials and keep, do everything we can to keep our economy strong and productive. I don't have anything against a tax for homelessness. I think that is something that should be considered and decided, I think, by the voters. I think it should be on a ballot, and people should have the ability to make that decision. And it shouldn't be buried in a sales tax. I don't think that's right. So I'm not against the tax for homeless. I'm not gonna say I'm for it. I'm against it. I am for letting the people make the decision on it and bring it out. But I would have to agree with Councilman Cavallari. I don't like the idea of adding things into our sales tax to offset other expenditures. That doesn't make sense, and that has repercussions. It's been tried in other states and other cities, actually here in this state, and has not been well received. So I would support not supporting this and asking them to please take it to the voters. Please let them make the decision on this.
Thank you, Councilmember Steckler. Councilmember Allison.
So I believe raising sales tax hurts the people that struggle the most. It's the most regressive type of tax if you're trying to help the people that need the help at the lowest wage earner category. So although I appreciate that it's not really our business, it's the county's decision, we live in the county and it will affect all of us. So I agree that a vote of the people, whether or not they want their sales tax to go up, seems like the more prudent thing to do, but I realize they did pass the House bill and they're authorized to go ahead and try. I would support us sending a letter to the council that we are against the sales tax increase.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilmember Allison, do you have anything you wanted to say, Councilmember Duque, or no?
I didn't at the moment. I wanted to hear everyone, but I guess since now that's done, this is a tricky one for me in that I don't think we need to send a letter as a council about this. I think this is something that, as Councilmember Allison said, it has been voted by legislature, and so then this is their opinion. I do agree, though, that this should be going to the voters. That doesn't make sense to me, that this is kind of the setup the way it's going. If my fellow council members decided that they did want to have us have a letter, I'm not comfortable signing this letter, the way it's written, the language in it, and, something to the effect of what we just said. If it's short, I like concise. I know it's not coming across that way right now, but I do like concise. We think these, that I would be very interested in looking at. I'd be interested in having that conversation. I'm interested in hearing from what Mayor Holtzclaw says. I'm absolutely willing to join in with the council members in terms of that. But the way it's currently written, I would not sign on with this.
Thank you, Councilmember Duque. I actually, hearing everyone discuss this, I actually, I hear what Councilmember Duque saying, and I think that perhaps would there be a consensus for us to direct the staff to write our own letter to sign on to next week that kind of supports our position that we feel that it should be taken to the voters and not sign on to this specific letter? That way we can be doing what our council wants to do instead of jumping into the fray for other letters. Well, do I have consensus for that?
I think that's an excellent idea, and I commend the two newest council members on the other end of the dais for mentioning it. Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Steckler as well. I think that's an appropriate response, and I think that if we direct staff to just put something very generic that simply says that we strongly urge the county council to not implement this tax, a councilmatic tax, that they allow it to go to a vote. Something simple in that sort of text.
Is that enough direction for you, interim city manager?
Mayor Pro Tem, thank you. Yeah, it is. We have some insight on our end too. We could discuss that as we put this letter together. We may have some thoughts on our end too, how we can better construct that letter for you, for all of you. Thank you.
Perfect. So let's get that put together, and then we can get it out for the public to see, and we can bring it back to us to discuss and vote on next week, just in time for their meeting on the 15th. So I think that's the direction. Thank you, everyone, for a great discussion. Sorry, I put some of you on the spot. All right, now moving on to, sorry, it resets every time. Reports. I will just start off. I just have a brief report. I just wanted to point out, I had someone give me a call and say something regarding the city Facebook page. It used to be accessible whether or not you were had a Facebook account or not, and for some reason it's no longer accessible. So just wanted to bring that to your attention and request that we make that accessible for everyone, again, whether or not they have Facebook or not. I know the police one is, so that I don't know if we just accidentally changed something in a setting somewhere. And also I had a couple people call and recommend that perhaps we should also add the newsletter online on our website, as well as in the publication that went out. So thought that might be something we may want to look at and consider. So with that, I will start at the end and start with Councilmember Steckler. Any reports?
Just one compliment to the staff on the publication that recently came out from the city. I thought it was just really well done. Brought in so many different parts of our city, so many different parts of our community. Well done. Kudos to the marketing team. Good job, everybody. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Cavallari.
Thank you, Mayor. I just think it's kind of funny. I was about to comment about the same exact thing regarding the city magazine. I think it really encapsulates different pockets of the city and the citizenry, and it really it was a good thumb through, and then it was a good read. So that's what it's about, and that's what we're paying the big bucks for. Secondly, December 7th, Pearl Harbor, member 2,403 service members lost their life on this day 80 years ago. We're incredibly thankful and grateful for their service. We're also grateful to those that still stand a post in this nation and hope that we can simply carry the water on their behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cavallari. Councilmember Allison, any reports?
No reports.
Thank you. Councilmember Duque, any report?
I just want to say thank you for allowing me the last two meetings to be able to still participate while I was gone. And I'm really thankful that I'm here in person. Councilmember Steckler, I can't see you very well from this direction. So if you ever see me scoot back, that's why, so I can look at you. I don't have a comment about the magazine. I did actually, it's very interesting. I wanted to comment on the wonderful video and the storm water and reminders and the social media posts that have been put together by the communications team. We are incredibly lucky with the group that we have. And I hope that I don't, sound like a broken record, but to have the team that we have and what they're doing and their creativity, and I know they must be incredibly busy during this time, is wonderful. And it's great to see. So I just wanted to say that during this time.
Councilmember Decay, I look forward to the time when I don't have to look through 5 levels of plexiglass to look at you too. So someday we'll be through this pandemic and we could take these things down.
Yes. All right, thank you. With that, moving on to the interim city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. We have a few items on the agenda here. The first one is I'm going to congratulate Angela Bolton, who's our new surface water program coordinator, accepted an offer, and she will be starting on December 13th next week. The second item is a streetlights report. First, I'd like to mention though, and I apologize, I don't remember the gentleman who came in earlier asking about the 161st Street and the Mill Creek Boulevard light. I got a message just recently from our Public Works Supervisor that, thank you, Matthew, that they were working on that light this afternoon. So we're on top of that. So the next item is streetlights report. The 3 items on this, there is a summary uploaded on the agenda, so you can read that. So I'll just go at a high level on this. The first one is that SR 527 and SR 96. There was a poll down there a while back, and we got that poll ordered. It won't be here until June of 2022 and installed probably a month later. The other 2 items are other polls down that will be under the responsibility of the PUD, and that's over at the Parks Division, and the other one is on Village Green Drive near the golf clubhouse. And again, that information is online, uploaded. The next item, we have about, 5 contracts that we extended for 6 months. 3 of those contracts for Gray and Osborne. The 2 relating to our, I believe it's called a grade C stormwater pipe repair. 2 of those contracts are extended through June 30th of 2022. The third one is for Gray and Osborne as well, and that's for engineering services. The fourth item is for Petite also for engineering services. That contract is extended through June 30th of 2022 as well. That's the 4th contract. The 5th one is for OTAC for our sub area study, and that contract is also extended for that same time period. So all that information is online for all of you to view if you'd like to see more detail. The next item is regarding our fire and EMS service update. As we know, over the past year, we've been working with both South County Fire and SURFR, also known as the Snohomish Regional Fire and Rescue. Recently, we were in our last council meeting, as we all know, we were presented with a request from SURFR to provide an offer to us. We wanted to provide you with an update of where we are with that. It's an overview of kind of where we stand right now, some of the criteria by which we're addressing these offers, and a timeline also, kind of a high level of what's transpired over the last year. And so with that, I'll hand it over to our Public Works Director, who is also our point of contact for the project here. Mike, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, City Manager, Mayor Pro Tem. I guess Mayor and Pro Tem together today, and council members. What we've got, I think, can you see my screen, the fire and EMS service options update? Is that showing?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so tonight we want to give you a quick update on where things are. I want to thank Karen Reed for the slides. We gave her the night off because she's worked lots and lots of hours on this. We appreciate that, but that's the where the slides came from. Last week, a lot of people came to the microphone and talked about the situation and the status on our discussions on fire services. And so we went back and kind of wanted to recap the history of where we've been. I'm not going to go through all these bullets, but the point is we started last October 2020 in 2020 with some discussions with Surfer and leadership to get started. We met again in November, met in December. We had various exchange of information. And that brings up to about June of last year, June of this just passed, is when the presentation was made to council. First time you guys publicly talked about this, I think, and talked about in detail. Bill Cushman came and talked to us about what the prospects were for different fire service options available to the city, with the contract being ended through a Surfer organization. At that time, you had directed the city manager to go ahead and start into discussions with South County Fire as an alternate approach. And so we've been proceeding with that. So this is kind of just a recap of those items. It's in your packet. It will be it's in front of you, I think, council members. Apologize, we just got it put together at 5 o'clock today. We'll put this uploaded for the public to grab later on. So update as of today, as of this afternoon. After the meeting last week, we reached out to Chief O'Brien and asked him if he and his staff would put together, he and his whole team would put together their idea for a proposal. They talked to the microphone last week about having a proposal for us. So we asked that they do that and get it to us as soon as possible. We all recognize we had a very short timeline. They called a special meeting for yesterday, December 6th. They had that meeting last night. And then after that meeting last night, just about 24 hours ago, they sent us that proposal. We received that. We've took that proposal this morning, and staff has spent most of the day looking at that in various fashions. But fundamentally, the one main thing is they're talking, instead of going directly to a parity contract or annexation, which was what we had thought there was their best offer earlier in the year. They've said they would look at a 3 years transition or a stair-step program to transition from our contract today to annexation or parity funding. We've got a bunch of questions on that. They had about 10 bullet points. We've got about 10 questions. They don't correlate one-to-one, but we just sent those back to Chief O'Brien and his team late this afternoon. And Chief O'Brien responded to me just during this meeting that he and his team were going to look at that. We're hoping to get that back by start of business Thursday morning. So we're doing the 24 hours here, 24 hours there, 24 hours here thing to try to get a package put together for your council meeting next Tuesday on the 14th. We are continuing discussions in parallel with that with South County Fire. Remember the resolution that was suggested last week was to have you consider entering into that process whereby we sent a resolution to South County Fire. They worked on it, sent it back. And so that was starting the opportunity for us to consider annexation. We will have a full presentation both on that and on the analysis of the two different options we now have for us in terms of annexation. We'll talk to you next week with that. And so we'll also be seeking your direction at that meeting. As we evaluate those criteria, we thought it was important to let you know what we think are the important criteria to look at those. So we're going to look at both annexation proposals from South County Fire and from Surfer. And I guess I should read through them to let you know. We're really fundamentally, we want to maintain the same high level of service. We heard that at the microphone last week. We've heard that continuously from our citizens. We do enjoy excellent fire service from anybody who comes to an alarm in the city of Mill Creek, whether it be from our main contract agency, Surfer, or whether it is by mutual aid through any of another number of other agencies. And that is tantamount that we need to have that continued high level of service. We're going to look at both the long-term costs and the short-term costs under how this may play out. Ideally, we are headed to an annexation approach because it no longer makes sense for us to be in the fire business. We've talked about that before. It's terribly expensive. No one wants to offer contracts anymore, and nor is it economical for us to do that in terms of our own fire department. And so really we're looking at the two different annexation proposals from the two different agencies that are adjacent to us. In particular, we'll look at the property tax implications and the benefit charge in each of those cases. Remember, there's different ways they price their services. So we'll look at that for the long-term costs under annexation. If annexation doesn't happen quickly, the city will be faced with a contract situation, and both organizations now have offered a short-term contract. So we'll look at the stair step of those contracts and see how it would price out. What would that contract price? And then we'll have to look at the city resources, how we would fund those contracts. And that could be from a one-time funding sources. For sure, we would have to go out and redo our EMS levy, which expires in 2022. Look at general fund taxes, lid lifts, something else. How do we pay the delta between what we have had in our budget in the past for fire and what the future costs will be? They are going up, as we've discussed before. We will also make sure we look at the fire station options. We own part of that fire station. We have a good price on that fire station should we choose to buy it. So we'll look under both of these alternatives, how that plays out. We'll look at the financial stability of both service providers. Really want to find a good partner for our taxpayers long-term. We're going to get out of the fire, out of being the middleman for the fire service. Services that our citizens get for, are looking for both fire and EMS. But we want to send our taxpayers on a good trajectory. So we're going to look at the long-term, not just short-term, but long-term, where they're going to go. And then long-term governance. We as citizens of Mill Creek who may be getting services from one of these other agencies, how do we get represented? How do we feel like our city has representation on the board in various fashions? So we'll look at the alternates between the two different structures. Here's a kind of an outline, again, in Karen fashion. In general, what we're doing in December, we'll be looking at those proposals next week. Right now, we're looking at those staff. We'll bring it to you next week. Determine whether to proceed with South County Fire annexation vote in 2022, as we've talked before, or whether we do a contract and then annexation with Surfer. And really, we need to understand that timeline and our next steps. So that'll be the focus of what Karen will be back with us next week and focusing on those items. In January, look forward to a further review of those proposed annexation terms and short-term contracts that we would have as a backstop in case the annexation was not successful. If we go with the South County Fire annexation vote in 2022, that path, we need to decide that preferred path for the city budget if annexation vote is successful, and decide preferred path for funding contract if the vote is not successful. If instead we went with the Surfer approach, we would work on more negotiations with them on this 3-year contract and develop some plan internally for how we would fund that contract. And then February, remember, we're headed towards a decision point before late February. If we're on the South County Fire path, approve the annexation plan and related documents, approve the backup service contract terms in case the annexation wasn't successful, and we'd forward that ballot measure request to the county by February 25th. That's to get it on a special election in April. That's required to have this taxes in effect later on so that in 2023 we have a funding source available, or the taxpayers be lined up to be able to be taxed directly under an annexation approach. Under the Surfer path, we'd execute a plan to raise the funds to pay the contract and decide when we would do an annexation vote. Under their 3-year plan, they would give us the opportunity to have 1 more year to decide to go to the voters in 22, 23, or 24. And that has both positive and negative ramifications. So again, those are the kinds of things we'll be evaluating over this next couple of days, putting in the packet, and getting back with you at next Tuesday's council meeting. That is a whirlwind tour of where we are. But are there any questions?
Councilmember Duquette?
I just want to acknowledge that thank you for putting this all together so quickly and responsive. I know, I mean, as we were talking about it last week, I went, oh, everything you had planned to do for the week is now gone. And I wanted to acknowledge that. So thank you. It's very clear, this outline, especially because that was my main question was, are we looking at 2 annexations or are we looking at the contract the way Councilmember Bond mentioned? So thank you for this. And I appreciate it.
You're welcome. If there aren't other questions, I will offer, we sent you an email last week, offering if you've got questions or comments or things you're confused about, we are very happy to have Karen sit down with you, or I'll sit down with you, or the team will sit down with you and walk you through things that may not be clear. We hope to have, our intention is to have a very clear presentation for you next Tuesday, but if there's little niggling details that you'd rather ask ahead of time, that would help us prepare a better presentation. And also maybe get some of those minor items out of the way. So we are open to do that. Give us a call. I should say we also are looking at, there may be some material we can send out early. There's some educational background material that rather than waiting until the Friday packet, we've got a meeting tomorrow to decide if there's some things that are ready to go. We might parcel some of this out early. We will also put that material in the packet for the public, but if there's some items we can send to the council early, we might do so.
Next time on the agenda for reports is a hiring update from our chief of police. Chief Young, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Interim City Manager. Since our last report to council, we have completed command interviews and polygraph examinations for 3 of the first group of candidates. That eligibility list was also certified by the Civil Service Commission on November 10th. Since then, we have conducted additional oral boards for 4 candidates, which were completed on November 19th. Following that, this group has completed the command interviews and polygraphs. We've also sent out the conditional offers of employment. At this time, we are currently in the process of scheduling psychological and medical exams for both of the groups. We are in a little bit of a situation with other agencies because of all the transition. Getting those appointments scheduled is a little bit difficult, but we are working on that very diligently. And finally, we're hoping to onboard some of these new officers in early January with a second group toward the end of January. And with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions? I don't think so. Thank you very much, Chief, for that update. And thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Next one.
Okay, the final 2 items on the agenda under reports are both the tree lighting and the City Highlights magazine that we brought up recently. This Friday at 5 p.m., December 10th, we will have a tree lighting. And we'll have Jody Hawkins explain and go in more detail about that as well. And the City Highlights magazine that comes out bi-yearly in both March and December. Jody?
Thank you, Martin, Mayor and City Council. We're excited about, we were excited to get the City Highlights magazine or City Highlights into the magazine, and excited by all of the response we've had, and appreciate your support on that. We've had, we set into motion doing some posts on social media to try to get the engagement up, and we're excited to see the numbers on that. Those just started this week. But so far we've had good response. One of the most exciting things we've had is especially that Scott has been working on very diligently. He's super talented, and he created a video and did the videography and production all himself for the stormwater surface video. And we have that. It's about a minute and a half video, or a minute and 15 minutes actually. And it features Frank Reinhardt speaking on stormwater topics. And it's one of the things that we did was for the first time was to boost this video on social media, and have had really exciting numbers just come back in the last 5 days. And Scott wanted me to make sure I shared those with you. But we had a post reach of nearly 4,000, which is really great. We only spent about $100 to push this out, and quite good engagement. I think we've had about nearly 400 people engage with the video. And so engagements, likes, comments, shares, people watching it nearly all the way through. Those numbers are pretty good. So we're excited about that. One of the content, we're doing a contest to increase that engagement as well. And one of the things that does is it helps fulfill some of the education requirements for the stormwater permit, which is also something that Frank Reinhardt was really important to him in working with us on this project. So you can check social media and look at some of the posts we're doing. So there'll be going on for this week, for next week, contests to have people go in and look at the newsletter, and also have them watch the video, including this video and also the police video that we did. And we'll be reporting back on the engagement with that, but we're encouraged. And the prize packs are kind of fun, and they're themed towards the fall and winter rakes and shovels and things like that, to get people actually, one, keeping the item and excited to be winning it, but to also get them involved in taking care of the property. And then the next thing, oh, and also I just wanted to say, I think that someone mentioned that we needed to have the newsletter on the city highlights on the website, and we have done that, and I'll send you the link for the PDF so that you can find that. And then the next thing we're planning on is Friday for the holiday tree lighting. It's from 5 to 6 p.m. We will be doing Facebook Live beginning at 5 p.m. We have Mayor Pro Tem Vinal will be speaking and announcing the different groups that will be singing or performing. Right now, those numbers are still a little bit up in the air, but you do have some information in your packet on that, and more to follow. But we have Santa coming. We're excited about that. We have our youth advisory board coming as elves, and we have hopefully Jackson High School students will be coming to perform, and possibly a singer from the Mill Creek Chorale. So we're excited. We're excited to do that, and excited to see you there. Any questions?
Any questions?
One thing I'd like to add is it will be live streamed. So
Yes.
all of our residents can watch this from home.
Yep.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm excited. I can't wait. It's gonna be so much fun.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. I don't think we have any questions.
Yeah, the no more reports, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you.
All right, thank you. With that, I would like to, yes, I'd like to move on to audience communication. Okay, I have someone here in the audience, name and address in 3 minutes.
Thought you dodged the bullet, didn't you? This will be very quick. I'm Randy Fay with Snohomish Regional Fire and Rescue, headquartered in Monroe. I just want to very briefly, but very sincerely, on behalf of our Board of Commissioners, thank all of you and Director Todd for pressing the pause button and giving us an opportunity to engage. It's we don't take that commitment on your part lightly. And even as we've been meeting tonight, there has been communication going back and forth between your team and the chief, and he's emailing us and asking us for input, and this feels very good, very natural for us. So thank you so much for that. I'm not about to stand here and try to negotiate anything, but philosophically, you know, we tried to listen very intently to all of the conversation last week. And what we've presented to your team to look at, besides the numbers, was trying to present a plan that would take some of the pressure off, because several of you articulated your plates are extremely full with your hiring decisions and a lot of things you got going. So that was important to us, to try to bring something back to the table that allowed you to breathe and not sacrifice other city business over this. So that was kind of our heart in this thing. And lastly, a lot of what we've included comes right out of our new strategic plan that we've just finished. And several of your council people were directly involved in input on the strategic plan for the district. And we just want to thank the council for letting us have their time and for your specific input into that. All of the cities we serve had a chance to weigh in, to give us direction, give us insight, challenge us. And that's so important to us in the partnerships that we have. So on behalf of the board, thank you so much for a chance to be a player here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Fay. Would anyone else like to speak? I'm gonna try to scroll through here online, see if I see any hands. All right, I don't see anybody with their hand up. All right, so with that, motion adjourned. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Nicely done, Mayor Pro.